And then if you look in the middle of the Mississippi Valley there, you see that giant thing that looks like a Stonehenge, for a better term. But the Mississippi River exits through Texas out into the Gulf of Mexico. The river, as we know, is the Mississippi, is coming out in the wrong place.
Welcome back to Raised by Giants, and welcome everyone in the chat, moderators and members out there. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have with us tonight the creator of Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube. A warm welcome back to the show, David Dubine. Thanks so much for coming on, brother. How are you doing? Well, this double-headed eagle right here has the crown on the top of, well, is that... do they have crowns on top of their heads and then one big crown over top of them? I mean, that could be depicted as the corona of the sun as well. And the crown of thorns on Jesus can be depicted as the corona around the sun. Halo can be depicted as the corona around the sun. You know, it's sun god worship.
Yeah, what about the filaments coming off the sun? If you had, a highly electrified state and you had 20, 30 filaments coming off the sun that were visible from our planet, then that would be the crown of thorns, would it not? Yeah, these are the Venetian coins here. So what you see, the lion is referenced down to the bottom left again. That is a very, very clean piece of iconography. Now, I am wondering if it was the time of Leo, which takes us back to, the time of the construction of the Sphinx. Now, is it that time they're referencing, or is it the old stories of the time of the beginning that they understood these energetic changes were happening at the time of Leo? Because if you go Leo, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, and you're way back at the other side of the galactic cross at that point. Now, this energetic thing is another common theme of, out of these, what you consider old buildings or, temples of, there seems to be some energy, magic energy redirected. Now, you could take it a million ways. Was it mirrors? Was it plasma? What was it? What was the machinery used to generate that type of solar, for a better term, glowing beams to come out of this? But you see this in many a place, and it's coming out. The oil paintings also from the 1400s have this a lot. The ones in the 1600s do not. So I noticed a couple things. When you're rolling back into the late 1300s and the early 14 to mid 1500s, there is a lot of pre and post cataclysmic damage showed. Like, you might see some where there's perfect archways and everything's well kept. And then the next set, those archways are broken and there's trees growing out of the top of them. And it's looked like people just wandered by and then just like, hey, there's a city here, we'll take it. So you're seeing cleanly pre-cataclysm and post-cataclysm in that 150-year period of paintings. But a lot of that pre-cataclysmic stuff has a huge amount of these kind of rays coming out of the temple buildings. And I can't explain it either. I just thought it was a cool shot to take. And it's an impression of a coin that was issued in Venice. And I don't have the date of issuance. I'm sure it was in the late 1500s, though.
If you showed this to a ufologist, Dave, they would say it's proof of extraterrestrials, bro. Well, it's interesting, too, because of the lion. Some researchers believe that the Sphinx in Egypt was a lion and that it was originally pointed at Leo, which would make sense.
Yeah, and again, this is Coronelli. He's the most famous cartographer. He did both celestial globes and terrestrial globes, both.
We've all seen the headlines talk about Ozempic and similar miracle weight loss shots, but what most people don't realize is that major analysis just found out that people who stopped taking these weight loss injections gain nearly all their weight back within a year. That's the catch. These drugs only work while you're on them. They're expensive, and the moment you stop, your body fights back. This is why, like BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate, and everybody these days is obsessed with weight management results. GLP-1 helps my body naturally trigger the same hunger-controlling, craving-reducing signals that Ozempic would, without needles, prescriptions, or the scary side effects. It also helps reduce hunger hormones, supports fat loss instead of muscle loss, and helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels. For a limited time, you can grab a bottle of BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate right now for 40% off, only at trimwithadapt2030.com. Plus, you receive a 60-day satisfaction guarantee and the free express shipping on subscriptions. Once again, go to trimwithadapt2030.com or click on that link in the description box below to get this deal right now.
And for me, man, these celestial globes are dynamite because they show the energy flows on them. And not only this one, but for some reason, when the Earth passes through and hits into somewhere along this line of where we sit in the heavens, look at those current flows coming out. That's so cleanly, you can't describe any other way than that's an amplified current flow along a line somewhere. Today, we will call that a Birkeland current. But the convergence of 3 Birkeland currents represented in a map from the early 16 or late 1500s on a celestial globe is quite interesting for me. Their understanding of plasma physics and energetic ropes across the universe here in our wider galaxy is just mind-blowing. Like, where did they get that knowledge from? This is encoded information that was there in plain sight for all to see. It was a mythical, fanciful, no, it wasn't. They were representing the current flows in different regions of space as we move through. So they knew where the energetics would change as the Earth passed through this in our movement around the galaxy. So somebody had the knowledge that passed it to them, and they were hiding it in plain sight, well, through their mythical schools as well.
You know, my other question about these maps that are, depicting other land masses, Asia being one giant land mass, and how did they know what everything looked like? How were those maps originally drawn? Like, was it just based off of memory? Because I'm guessing that's how a lot of the original maps were, especially of the United States. Whenever, people first came over, they would go back to England and like draw what they saw. So are these like drawings from memory? Like, what's going on? Did they have some sort of flight capabilities that they were able to see it from the sky? Which then brings in a whole other realm of questioning.
Some of those answers I don't have answers for. Those questions I just don't have answers for. Because that was the recurring theme too, was these globes that are in the museums, these large ones, they're probably like 4 feet wide, done late 1500s, early 1600s. They have Baja disconnected from California, they have Tartaria, and they have Japan as one continuous island. So for me, this is a very near post-Ice Age map. These are not current maps that we're looking at. They're source maps that were sent down. Like, I have 600 plus photos of just the globes that I took, of all these different kind of globes. There were several of them. Now, one of the ones that I thought was a watermark on the bottom, it was the part of the Piri Reis map that we understand is the Sea Kings map.
Here's one of the globes.
Yeah, that's the celestial globe there again. Now, they show the head of Medusa, and they also show, the current flows that are moving around through the spiral arm of our galaxy and how they look at these. They were trying to depict to you an energetic frequency of animals that they understood at that time and the interplay of these energies based on like how a bull and a horse might interact, or a bear and a horse might interact together. So you have to look at it in a different sense of just that itself. The hemisphere of there was always a phoenix, and it was always right next to the Birkeland currents and the Pisces fish. So what's interesting for me is in the Pisces fish, you'll see the Birkeland current, but then right below that, there's a phoenix. So as you're transiting, if you would, and you were following the zodiac around, as soon as we transited through the Pisces area and that ceased, then boom, we get the phoenix, which is always, what is the phoenix? That's always a harbinger of reset.
It's interesting, Dave, because I put a phoenix in the background of the thumbnail of this video. What a coincidence.
Okay, this is off the Nautical Museum here. So this is Tartaria, and this is the flag of Tartaria that they would fly on their ships. Now, I'm trying to clean up some photos because photographing oil paintings is a different ball game in itself because there's so much reflectivity. So you always have to be at like an angle to get it. But some of these battle paintings, were 20-foot long oil paintings. So to try to grab, battle scenes of ships in between of star forts and this, it takes a fair minute to clean that up. So this flag that you're seeing here is the actual Tartarian flag, but that is also in 1400 oil paintings when they had naval battles that ships were flying this flag right here. And you'll also see that long streamer one that I sent you, the long red streamer one. That is also a depiction of Tartaria and their flag. Like if you do Google image search, you'll find Tartaria, the flag, or you'll find the mythical animal. Well, that mythical animal is on that battle flag, that long pennant one. And whatever it is, that mythical lion that's represented in so many places and spaces, that's the big thing, is why is it so front and center of a mythical creature on things that when they're supposed to be so realist at the time? It doesn't make sense for me. Like this is on the Coronelli globes. Now, Coronelli did dozens of globes, and mainly he was pulling from source maps. At the very bottom where Antarctica should be, not discovered in the late early 1600s, he has that exact one piece from the Period Reefs map plugged into the exact spot right under South America, but the rest of Antarctica is blank because they didn't have a source map for it. But whatever it was, he was able to scrape that map and plug it into the correct position below South America. So for me, at first I thought it was a watermark, like, oh man, like who the hell would spill some water on this thing and damage the globe? Because it looked like a squiggly watermark on the bottom. And then I saw the original in the humidity controlled glass encapsulation area. And sure enough, that same squiggly line was there. And I'm like, you know what? Let me take a closer look at that. This is what's like masked and hidden in this place.
Where were these globes at?
They're in Venice, in the museum in Venice. And the cartographer's name is Coronelli, and he's the most famous cartographer in Italy.
How big were these? Were they really big? Could you walk all around them, or was there like
they're about 4 feet across.
Wow.
Yeah, and they actually have a mounting that's on the floor. So they're in some sort of like metal spindle that moves around, and then they have the latitude and longitude on those iron bars that are coming down onto the wood on the floor there.
And when do they say that these were created?
Early 1600s.
Wow. So what do they think about Tartaria and this, or Tartar? I think Tartar was the original name for it. What do they say that it was?
They don't. They never even realized it as being something significant or special to even look at. It's just part of what was. Like for us, we're like, Tartaria, there's a thing on the map. For them, they're like, they had battles with this kingdom, or they traded with it at some time in the past. So for them, it's just, all right, Phoenicians, cool. Like it really doesn't stick out in their whole time frame of things. For us in the West, it does. Something different here in America and Australia, and the research of Tartaria, it seems to be like this mystical kingdom thing that is just like hidden in history. But over in places like Venice, it's part of what was in their trading partners and what was in their sea battles for battle over, port facilities and kingdoms of times past. It is what it is.
Now, just for the audience that's listening, you took these photos, right? You didn't.
Yeah, these are all my own photos. That's right.
You didn't take these off of the internet or any of that nonsense. This isn't from Google. You were actually there. You actually took the photos of these globes.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing. Like I was a real tall guy. You got to realize that this thing's encapsulated in like a 5 foot tall glass box, humidity controlled. And this is the top of the globe. So, I mean, I'm standing there going away like this, like trying to take my camera, standing on my tippy toes, trying to get this thing to focus in on the top of the globe. And I noticed that right away with Tartaria, and I was like, what else is up there too? So I took a few more shots of the tops of the globes too, because some of those older source maps show some islands up in the Arctic, but I don't see that on these globes here. I got to see what I can do with the resolution and what I can do with the contrast. But just as a quick visual glimpse, I just don't see that kind of 4 islands that are, half, pizza shapes that sandwich together that we've seen some of those maps that show 4 giant islands in the middle of the Arctic. Like that's not on these globes. But I do think these are a far older globe, because if you're looking far over to the east, you see what appears to be as Japan as one giant island, not a set of islands disconnected with sea level rise. So these maps, I do believe, were when sea levels were far, far lower than they are today. So, put me a time on that when Japan was one contiguous solid island.
It was just important for me to mention that you actually took these photos, because whenever you're searching online for a lot of this stuff, dude, you don't know what's been edited. You don't know what's been photoshopped. They could just be photoshopping in Tartaria name into a lot of these old maps. You never really know, but this is legit. You've seen this with your own eyes. This is a picture that you took, and it says Tartaria on it.
Yeah, what's interesting is below the tar, look at that. The structures there, those are not mountains. So the depictions of mountains are cleanly, they're very different. Those are structures.
We've all seen the headlines talk about Ozempic and similar miracle weight loss shots, but what most people don't realize is that major analysis just found out that people who stopped taking these weight loss injections gain nearly all their weight back within a year. That's the catch. These drugs only work while you're on them. They're expensive, and the moment you stop, your body fights back. This is why I like BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate, and everybody these days is obsessed with weight management results. GLP-1 helps my body naturally trigger the same hunger-controlling, craving-reducing signals that Ozempic would, without needles, prescriptions, or the scary side effects. It also helps reduce hunger hormones, supports fat loss instead of muscle loss, and helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels. For a limited time, you can grab a bottle of BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate right now for 40% off only at trimwithadapt2030.com. Plus, you'll receive a 60-day satisfaction guarantee and the free express shipping on subscriptions. Once again, go to trimwithadapt2030.com or click on that link in the description box below to get this deal right now.
So what are those things anyway? Do you think? I mean, they look TP-like.
But then how do you know the placement of where these structures actually are, and if you don't have an aerial view of it? That's my thing of this. Like, how do you know the layout of this map? How would you know the placement of where all these trees are, and where these what you're saying are structures, if you don't have a topographical look at it?
A lot of unknowns in history, it does seem. Here, I'm going to send you some Baja California maps here that are disconnected. Here, I'm sending you 3 images right now. Because another thing that's quite interesting is in the center of the United States, and what we consider like the Mississippian cultures, they have a giant image of what looks like a giant Stonehenge. And then I found another globe online, as you say, that matched up, but the area that looks like a very clean Stonehenge that's depicted in this globe, which I took the images myself, that there's a later rendition of another cartographer about maybe 50 years later. I forget his name. He shows something like that in the middle of along the Mississippi River, but it just looks like a circle with like 3 things coming out of it. It's not, nearly as dense of the thing. So pop these images open, and I really am surprised at what I had found in these images also.
Yeah, really quickly before I get these pulled up, comment on this coin here really quickly.
Yeah, again, this is a mythical coin, Venice issue. So what is it with this chimera / lion mythical beast that everybody was so in tune with, or worshipped, or found as a source of wealth and control and power? Because it's represented in the coat of arms. And if anybody studies heraldry out there, you'll understand about that. But it's front and center of the control center of the seas of the Adriatic and the overland routes, and the wealth and the power and the trade of Venice, which also, I can't believe the stories of the construction of Venice. They're saying that they, were running from marauders, and they went out and pounded a bunch of sticks in the ground, and they put stone layers, two layers deep. And then they built all these cathedrals in the city on top of just what we consider sticks in the water. Okay, well, some of these poles from trees were 75 feet long that went down through the mud layer and then hit the clay layer at the bottom. And they said that there's tens of millions of these poles that have been pounded in. And then they put dual layers of rock as their like substrate. And then they build on top of that with an outer casing set of stones to prevent water damage from wave action. Now, if you've ever been to Venice, that thing's like 4 miles long by a mile wide, with some of the largest cathedrals in Italy. And it's supposed to be all built on top of what you consider trees with, you know, like a pencil shape dug and slammed down into the clay below. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? That's the story? That if it's true, and they do find when they, you know, repair some buildings, that these things have been pounded in, but they fossilized. Like somehow the minerals had been replaced where these trees that were fully slammed down through the mud into the clay had somehow turned into fossilized rock, hardened. And I'm like, this is not a new building thing. If it is, and they do find when they repair buildings, this type of thing, but then it's all wrapped in metal to keep those so they don't move back and forth. So the entire set of whatever trees were rammed down in through the mud layer down to the clay layer were all connected by a metal lattice, double stone layers on top, outer facing stones, and then they built on top of that. That is not our construction. That is construction from far long ago where technology was eclipsing anything that we have today. You can't tell me that you went out into the sea some miles, 4 miles out off the coast and decided to start pounding 10-foot long, 75-foot long logs into the ocean and then put substrate on top of that and then build an entire city. And I'm not talking a city. I am talking one of the greatest cities on the planet. And the largest cathedrals on our planet sit on top of sticks, basically, is what they're telling you as the story, all built in a few hundred years. Impossible, absolutely impossible to believe when you see it. Impossible.
Here's the pictures of the other globes that you just sent.
Okay, what do you see there? I see Baja California disconnected from California. So we are talking long ago mappage here.
Yep, that's what it looks like.
Now, if you go to the next one, that's a little bit wider, that encapsulates all of America there. If you take a look, there's a next one that shows that part of Baja California, the center of the United States, and Florida. Yep. The Florida coastline looks pretty similar to what it is today, but you'll notice, for those of you who follow rivers, the river, as we know, is the Mississippi, is coming out in the wrong place. And Florida is much wider also, going out toward the Bahamas.
Now, can these be geographical errors? You know, it's a high possibility, but this map
cartographers were put to death if they faked the figure. That was one thing that a lot of people didn't want to be cartographers, because if you made mistakes, you were put to death. So, you know, that being part of your job description, you mess it up, you fake it, there's a wrong thing, you know, because entire navies and entire empires were built on them understanding where things were. Trade routes, armies, movement of goods. Entire societies and civilizations were built on the correctness of the details of these maps.
It almost looks like the entire West Coast, there's like a river running through, separating the entire, it would be California, Oregon, and Washington.
Yeah, the Yucatan Peninsula is also a little bit quirky. Hispaniola, when you go down to where like Puerto Rico is and Dominican Republic, etc., Cuba, that also looks very much larger than it is today, meaning sea levels were lower. And then if you look in the middle of the Mississippi Valley there, you see that giant thing that looks like a Stonehenge, for a better term. But the Mississippi River exits through Texas out into the Gulf of Mexico.
See if I can zoom in on this a little bit.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, right in the center there. So Mississippi River is coming out in the wrong place. Now, to get a river that wrong, that's like a pilot not knowing how to read a compass.
Nouveau Mexico. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was talking with Ransom on my program, and I gave him this map, and he goes, "Yeah, man, all the mountains seem to match up in the correct position." So he was saying, "Yeah, you can see the mountain ranges that I recognize here as well." And it says New Guadalajara, like Guadalajara, Mexico, like Guadalajara. And then you got the Stonehenge type of thing right there, and then off to the right or to the east. To me, what we're looking at is Somebody who made a series of maps when the sea level was far lower and the land contours were different. That part of what you're looking at there is now sandwiched against California. So what kind of earth change would be required to take that disconnected landmass and smash it against? That's where the fault line is. So if you look at the San Andreas Fault, that's where that piece is now sandwiched up against California.
That's where it break off, yeah.
Yeah, that's where it breaks off, or where it reconnected. San Andreas Fault right there is that reconnection / disconnection spot. So this gives validity to massive earth change somewhere along the way.
Asteroid impact, natural disaster.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. I mean, there's several people have theories.
Yeah, because I was looking a little bit further south on that, and you can clearly see that big line of mountains there would be the Himalayan mountains. And what I was hoping to zoom in on is the far east there, where you see the latitude, demarcation there with that piece of metal going across the globe. To zoom in where Japan is, because it shows it is a contiguous island, and Taiwan's much, much larger than it is today also. So if you go into what you consider the islands of the east, and I'll go a little more east on that, pull that thing over to, and now there's your little TP section there.
I'm trying to get it over.
Nanmo Poplar, whatever that is. Yeah, so you're looking at Japan right there. So you can see the Korean Peninsula comes down. And there's a lot more landmass there at the bottom of the Korean Peninsula. Now with that Jeju Island, that's totally water separated, but it looks like, there's a bunch of teeth islands coming off of southern Korea down to Jeju Island. That's 200 or some feet lower sea level. Yeah, and here's an interesting one. Look at Taiwan right there. The size of Taiwan is easily 25 to 30% larger than it is today.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And that's the thing. Do we even know what our true history is? Because it seems like a lot of energies and the way to create on this earth are being hidden from us as well. So if you go back through the past, you start to see these chapters of rise and collapse of civilizations, and you need to ask why they happened, those rises and collapses. Was it solar activity? Was it lack of food production? Was it an all-out world war that we have been, I guess, misinformed about? Because, our entire classical history, it's like the Phoenicians and the Greeks and the Romans. What happened to the rest of the planet? You're telling us that we didn't know anything about all of the workings of the rest of the planet except some little tiny road going across the desert, the Silk Road, and then all the rest of the world just unknown? Sounds a little far-fetched for me. You think there would have been connectivity, and they say, the ships didn't sail until this time or that time, but we have an enormous amount of relics that show interconnectivity of these continents thousands and thousands of years before history said they were. I'm just showing you one glimpse of it. Somebody had these maps, maps of the ancient sea kings, great book, pick it up. It talks about the Piri Reis map, which I referenced on that bottom, that plugged into Antarctica several hundred years before discovery of Antarctica. So there was some knowledge of at least longitude and latitude preceding anything mathematically that we're supposed to have had. Pyramid construction, that's a whole different thing. But if you want to go back into it, then where does that technology come from? There's no way they could have cut those blocks and put them up. But that could be 65 videos in themselves, and many people have done more research than I ever could on that. I'm just trying to say, even this image here for you, the Acropolis, we're all familiar with this, downtown in Athens now. But those lines coming up were apparently rocks from some sort of catapult. This is what it looked like prior to what we see it as now. The walls are different. The walls are fortified. The entire structure, and when was this? This was 1694. Like the way to even have you believe history unfolding is this thing collapsed thousands of years ago and has been in ruins, and we finally picked it up and put it back together and super glued the rocks, and yay, look how we can't even reconstruct it to the grandiose, absolute magnificence that it used to be. We're not even that close. So just a little over 300 years ago, this was what you're seeing here. And I would ask you to look at the flag. Like, what size is this flag to be flowing? And, we're in the realist types of genre back then as well. There was no impressionist anything until the camera was invented. Also, when I was in the museums, you'll see the sacred geometry and the Meteoron's cube directly above this pyramid. And once I saw that, that was my first clue. Oh, there's something around here. And as soon as I started looking, those globes were arranged just around this pyramid, painting in the center of this Meteoron's cube. And I thought, wow, there's an enormous amount of hidden messaging here. And this is the thing about some of these museums still leave clues and messages for us. You just have to seek it out and start to look for this and go beyond this training we've had in school to try to teach us this linear progression of time, which is not linear at all. It's cyclic. And that's the whole thing about energies coming and going and flowing or stopping. The ability for us to grow food on the planet is a gigantic game changer. Bam, you hit the brick wall and you just stop. Are we at this point again? When it comes to solar energies and solar activity, what would cause such massive earth changes? These, in my firm opinion, are what we're looking at. Not full glaciation, where sea levels were some 400 feet lower. We're not the present sea level where we are now. A lot of the maps that I look at, and I was talking to Ryder in this, I think they're about 200 foot difference, about that halfway rise of the sea level rising. So if you go back to about the midway point, 200 foot lower, it appears a lot of these maps match that time or that sea level period. Thought I'd bring it to you. Not a lot of people have had this mid journey between, the Younger Dryas impact coming out of the Ice Age into this and then where we subsequently sit today. One thing's clear, though. There's a group of people on this planet that understand sacred geometry, vibration, and frequency to be able to, A, manifest incredible amounts of wealth, but B, also hold an enormous amount of the population down who doesn't, I guess, delve into this, see it, or understand that these things are interrelated and how not only our world is structured, but the way the universe has operating rules within it. Were we taught about this at school? Of course not. Meteoron's cube. When was the last time you saw Meteoron's cube tossed around in a kindergarten class for everybody to understand sacred geometry in that? I don't think so. You need to be going to very special schools if you are, and generally that costs, what, $80,000, $90,000 a year for a kindergartner to head to? That's what I'm talking about, those types of more, let's say, entrenched wealth that's been dragged through the centuries. The only way you could drag it through the centuries is if you understood the cycles and get ready for that and prepare for it. And also be able to write the laws as you come out of this tumultuous reset period. So go back through history and take a look at how the rise and falls of civilization. And one of the greatest things that needs to be understood is the sun, how it behaves. And everywhere I walked around in Venice, I kept seeing, and not just Venice, in Verona and Palmanova and all these other places I went up to, northern Italy. Kept seeing these sundials everywhere. Large towns, small towns, sundials everywhere. But if you notice that it even shows the linear progression of coming down to, and I was talking to my sister the other day, Christmas is when the sun stops in the sky for 3 days in its journey of that midpoint. Just when we come to winter solstice, the sun appears to lock in place for 3 days before it starts its journey again on the 25th. So then you start to, well, are they overlapping religion here? Is this some sort of, encoded knowledge within religion itself? Seem to be a lot of that around. So these sundials, and they're very precise, even though, this one's a reconstruction after an earthquake, obviously. There's been a lot of damaged buildings through the years here, but they still seem to reconstruct. And other messages here, and this is around all those images around the Nautical Museum. If you look carefully at this, if you take that green door as the sun, then you'll start to see the 8 planets of the known world or universe at that time. And you'll start to see the furthest planets out, Jupiter and Saturn, Uranus, and then we get closer in. So if you really stop this frame here and take a look for a second, This is a representation of the planets circulating around the sun to try to go around the church. I know the Inquisitions had stopped-ish, but they were still very underground. So you got to look at that. Those who were trying to destroy that knowledge were the enemy. And then you fast forward 400 years. I'm looking at planets revolving around the sun encoded in something that wouldn't get you burned alive. Right here. Again, take it for what it's worth. I'm just throwing it out there. This is what I see when I walk around. My mind works in a different way than maybe a lot of people do. I see like something different, especially in these oldest of places, encoded in. So here's our 24 hours. Again, it's not a, I guess, solar calendar or a, daily, if you're looking at how the sun's moving and it's telling you which time it is. Sundials are everywhere. But what is this exactly? And I'll zoom it in for you. It is a clock. But again, I've seen something like this in Prague that also mimics the heavens and the solar movements along with the lunar movements, and then it's encoded inside a regular 12-hour clock. But things are moving amongst that. So, what is it with the change of the ages as well? Every time we come into a change of an age, there is another thing I saw everywhere I went across Europe was when we moved out of either the Greek era or the Roman era, those 2,000-year periods, everything from the previous era was just like smashed to bits. That's why you find all these marble statues with all the noses broken, all the ears broken, all they really try to like turn it back into a round bowling ball again. Everything in the previous era was destroyed, and we're coming into a new era of Pisces. So would not this world be destroyed and reset for a new era as we have seen through the past? Now, I just am unsure, like, going back during the Phoenicians or go back to, say, the Mesopotamian eras, we got several 2,000-year periods running through these precession of the equinox, what we know as the zodiac. Each time we moved out of that, like I said, Taurus, I was talking about the Aries, Pisces. You're already going back 6,000 years. Now we're coming into Aquarius. The flows in our spiral arm of the galaxy change. We're moving through different densities and energetic densities, but also actual physical densities of space debris as we transit. We're moving at the same time. We just don't sit here and it moves around. We're moving with it at the same time, and tremendous speeds, like mind-boggling speeds. Somebody had mapped out these. That's why, when you're born into a zodiac sign, you're born into a certain energetic frequency based on the yearly. But then we have the great year, which is also 12 of these zodiac signs. We are moving into another one. So if you're looking at all these changes happening today, moving into digital currencies, everything's moving faster. We got all these changes that are really just absolutely mind-boggling at the speed they're happening, but just all-encompassing of the planet. Go back 2,000 and then 4,000 and then 6,000 years and see how things had moved, been destroyed, reborn out of the ashes, the phoenix, and why our world's moving it as it is today. So anyway, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the images. Leave me some comments below what you think. I traveled to Croatia, up through the rest of Italy. We went up to Slovenia. We went up into, like I say, Czech Republic. Way out in the countryside, out to near Neumo with the underground cities. I'd love to bring you some images like that. If you do like these types of images and this type of content, let me know. The extreme weather, I love doing that type of video. But if you like the ancient history stuff, I'd love to delve into that a little more, because I think they're melding right now. And I think that's why there's so much turmoil on the planet. Electromagnetic frequency changes are happening. Magnetic field on our planet, stepping down, going depleting, declining. More, galactic cosmic rays from those two supernova or micronova, whatever you like to term those as, come blasting in over the last year. More earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, silica-rich magma chambers hitting on those cosmic rays, boom. And now we get a volcano in the Alfa region of Ethiopia. Hasn't erupted in 10,000 years. Just a month after that second supernova with the cosmic rays came banging in. So we're definitely on some sort of change right now. I'd like to cover it because I really think that looking at our ancient past brings us into what we see as a crystal ball moving forward. Because if you look around where it says 5 or V5, those are the twins, and then we move into what is like that 6 o'clock position at the bottom. That's Taurus. So we go from Gemini into Taurus, into Aries, into Pisces, and now we're moving into Aquarius, which means, for me, in my opinion, more cosmic rays creating denser cloud cover and more floods just on the general, a very much wetter atmosphere, a very much wetter planet, which in turn creates massive crop losses in the non-stability to produce food on the levels we used to because, well, soils are saturated. We can't judge the weather any longer. Patterns are going out of flow. We're not going to be able to understand and get that stabilized system that we've enjoyed for the last 200 years. That's going out the flow door. Different place down the river. Maybe that's why they want to control the food so tightly. Again, I rambled. Thanks for watching. If you like this type of content, buymeacoffee.com/civilization. Also check out bni.life/civilization. Protovite Plus, 100 nutrients, 1 pack. Please support our sponsors so I can bring you more content just like this. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.